What if the thoughts in your head aren't telling you the truth? Today's guest is here to challenge that and help you understand how trauma, shame, and overthinking can quickly shape your life without even realizing it. Malisa Hepner is a trauma therapist and podcast host who helps people reconnect with themselves, break free from harmful patterns, and find peace after even the most difficult experiences. Her work is deeply personal, shaped by her own journey through loss, healing, and rebuilding. And today, she's using that experience to help others feel seen, understood, and supported. If you ever felt stuck in your own mind, overwhelmed, or unsure how to move forward, then this conversation is for you. Please join me in welcoming Malisa Hepner. Let's get into it. Hello, Melissa, and thank you for joining the Influence Exchange today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Of course, it's a pleasure. You are such a fascinating inspiration human being. Your story touched me emotionally, and the audience is going to listen to your story and they're going to take away so much that maybe some people are dealing with. So, you are a therapist for trauma. And how can someone deal with trauma on a day-to-day basis?
Well, um, I think the biggest tenets of any sort of life after trauma that isn't really dealt with is separation from yourself first, where if you've had a lot of trauma in very early childhood, then the separation from yourself would be really big by the time you reach adulthood, because it makes you separate from your body. You just become this floating head that either ruminates nonstop or dissociates nonstop. um for myself, I was like a super overthinker, just constantly really stuck in my head with a lot of really yucky, ugly noise and just narratives that were really harmful for me. And I couldn't feel sensations in my body very much because I was so disconnected from my body and disconnected from who my true essence was. And then the other part of that is that you start to put barriers between you and everyone around you too. So the the large majority of my work is teaching people how to get out of their heads, how to quit overthinking, how to quit ruminating, how to quit dissociating, and come back and be present and grounded and be connected to their bodies and to who they were before the world told them who they needed to be.
Of course. And if someone is dealing with a loss, how can they deal with trauma and everyday life?
I would say that's kind of a very similar path. I think all loss is a trauma, and I think that's
Sure.
one of the big things that we really miss with grief is that there is a trauma to your system, even when it was expected. So that's where you'd really get into like you hear a lot of people say like big T, little T trauma with
Sure.
a loss, depending on what it is and how much notice you had about it, that's going to range on how traumatic of an experience it was for you. But it is trauma. And so grief really gets this reputation for being like a feeling or something you need to check off things to get through. And really, I would say grief is a weight that gets added on to everything else you were already dealing with and a huge spotlight onto
Sure.
anything that you hadn't dealt with.
Sure. Recently, my son, he's young, he's 9 years old, and he goes to Taekwondo. And one of his mentors, an older gentleman, teach was teaching him Taekwondo. And recently, he's a firefighter.
Mm.
And recently, in a local neighborhood, there was a house fire, and he got stuck in the basement.
Oh,
And unfortunately, he passed.
yeah.
And that's when you say trauma, that affected my 9-year-old son.
Oh, I bet.
And we didn't know how to talk. to a 9-year-old that's still learning in life.
Mhm.
And he's saying to us, what happened to Steve? Why did he pass away? And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's extremely hard. And my wife and I talking to ourselves, saying, how are we gonna move forward and make sure he's okay? My son is okay.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and with kids, we do get so scared that they can't handle the truth. But
Sure.
whatever you don't say to a child experiencing grief, they're going to fill in the gaps with their
Mhm.
imagination. So it
Yeah.
really is better to be honest. Now, would you want to give like awful, awful details? No, but I think it's
Mhm.
perfectly appropriate to say he's a firefighter. He went to fight a fire, went inside a building that he couldn't get out of.
Yeah. Yeah.
What what's wrong with saying that? And then the other part
Right.
about what I've really learned is kids' grief doesn't look like our grief because they don't have the capacity to even form the emotional sentences, let alone speak them. So, what's really important is to give them creative outlets to, and rituals for
Sure.
grieving, like painting a rock for them or something creative, just anything that feels true to you and the types of things that your family enjoys to do, but rituals and enduring connections. So even a child who had a loss outside of the family would still
Sure.
need that enduring connection where there is some sort of tradition. And with that type of loss, it's kind of hard to know. I mean, Taekwondo is one of those like intimate
Hmm.
sports. So the
Yeah.
relationship really is pretty intimate. And so, with that type of loss, this may be somebody that he holds on to some grief for the rest of his life, and grief really is just the love and the memories and whatever. But keeping some way for him to feel connected with him, like visiting the grave or planting a plant, that he can take
Yeah.
care of, whatever it is. I mean, again, true to you, but we as a society are so afraid of rituals around grief. It feels
Yeah.
morbid or wrong or scary or dark. And it is the things that really provide a lot of relief whenever you get to take part of them.
Of course. Of course. And if someone is dealing with trauma, Melissa, what are some of the tools that you could teach a person, a family, whoever it is, that they could deal with and use on a day to day basis?
Well, one really, really important tool is teaching people to talk about their stuff.
Sure.
Trauma tells us that connection is very unsafe, that everybody leaves and
Mhm.
there's no point in trying. Nothing I do is good enough. So many subconscious narratives just floating around. I'm too much. I'm not enough. I have the weight of the world on my shoulders to carry and no one to help me carry it. And that may be true when the trauma occurs. All of those things may have been true or they may not have, and likely someone just didn't know how to walk you through a really traumatic experience, because the trauma doesn't come from what happens, it comes to the
Sure.
response to what happened. So if you didn't have anyone around you to hold you, to nurture you, to carry you, to you know to offer you any sort of emotional support, that's when the trauma grows. And so much of that is because we don't know how to talk about it. No one lets us
Sure.
talk about it. And so, even though I know it feels really scary, really unsafe, and like there's zero point in doing it, finding one safe person or even recording voice notes, recording yourself on video, something to get that stuff out, because the more silent you stay, the more
Yes.
compounded all of that stuff becomes, because it's just a loop in your brain that goes over and over and over. So, emotion is energy in motion. It is
Sure.
important to get those things out by talking, by doing some movement. So, that would be one really important factor in recovering from trauma. The other would be to work with someone in some capacity to identify your shame. We are
Sure.
all riddled with shame and we don't even realize it. I know for myself that I would never have imagined that every ounce of my life was being driven from a place of fear and shame. Never. And
Sure.
after uncovering what my shame was and what those narratives were, it's so easy to identify now when that stuff pops up. But my brain was full of shame. It all sounded like my voice, but different characteristics of my voice and just arguing with one another. And I just thought I
Yeah.
was crazy. And that's
Yeah.
what shame will do to you, is all the programming that you've received your whole life to tell you you're not good enough for all kinds of reasons. It's growing in intensity every day of your life until you learn how to deal with it. So that's the other big part that I help people quiet the noise of shame and of overthinking, and teach people how to come back to themselves, how to, grow a love for yourself. Because I was a person who was like, you have to love yourself, you have to like yourself. I believed I did. I
Yeah.
did not in any way like myself. I'm still uncovering ways in which perfectionism is sneaking up in my life. It's just, I would encourage you to really figure out your shame. If you do
Yeah.
that and you start talking to someone, anyone, because we think that I've been in the mental health field for a long time, even before I opened a private practice. So,
Sure.
I mean, the truth is, and I fear judgment sometimes whenever I say this out loud, but I say it anyway. But I always like to name when something feels vulnerable to say because everything
Yeah.
feels vulnerable for me, and I'm scared of
Right.
vulnerability. Um,
Mhm.
but I was like, well, why would I go to therapy? Like, they don't know anything more than I know. So, like, what's the
Right.
point? And
Oh
why would I
my,
talk
yes.
to my friends about it? Because they can't help me. They're not like emotionally intelligent. And then I've realized the point of talking is just to get it out. And that's the only reason. Yes, there are benefits to therapy. Obviously, I believe that. I'm a therapist. But the talking is literally just to get it out of your body, get it out of your brain.
Absolutely.
So if you can just start with those things, working on your shame, and there's lots of information out there about that. The book that changed my life and that I recommend to every person that I work with and on every show I ever go on,
Sure.
it's called the Finding Peace Workbook, and it's by a guy named Troy Love. You can buy it for 25 bucks on Amazon,
Yeah.
and it is so good at helping you identify your shame and the narratives that come along with that. So, working on your shame, working on learning how to feel safe enough to tell somebody what's going on in real time, not
Sure.
2 weeks later whenever you've decided you've quote unquote worked through it, in real time what you're going through, not for any other reason other than get it out. You just need someone to
Yeah.
witness you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thinking about it, you talking about shame and going back, my younger, I would say 20s, I had a lot of shame. I will hold everything in.
Mhm.
And then it takes that one moment, Melissa, for me to explode.
Yes.
And I will
Yeah.
always say, "Oh, I'm right. Whatever." Absolutely not. It was incredibly wrong. I should have learned from at that time. It took years and years and years for me to realize I'm just damaging my own soul. Just
Yes.
exploding on anyone, a
Piling
friend, a
on to
family
your
member.
shame. Yeah.
Horrible, horrible.
Yes.
Horrible, and I as I got wiser and I learned, and not only just learning about myself,
Mhm.
my inner self, I started apologizing to the people I did hurt in my life, and I've learned so much and pretty much become a better human being and a man, I would say. So
Yeah, I
it's
totally
tough.
resonate with that because the more we hold things in and internalize it, and especially if we're people pleasers, if we're running around
Yeah.
just trying to make other people happy, and we're internalizing and intellectualizing all of our experiences, our nervous system just becomes fried. It's burnout. And
Yes.
so the slightest things agitate you, and you can't deal with them. You're living in a
Mhm.
constant state of survival. And the way I explain it is, when we're in survival, we're running from the bear. When we're running from the bear, we're not dealing with emotions. You can't,
Right.
if you're running from a bear, you're not going to turn around and ask the bear how it's feeling, right? You're going to like try to save your life. I was waking up in that state, going to sleep in that state 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 44 years. So, yeah, I reached a place where, I mean,
Yeah.
I was so snappy to everyone, and then honestly, that's why I got into such a dark place, because my reactivity was just so bad that I was like, everyone's better off without me. And then the other
Yeah.
part of that is, while I was really reactive and it was unkind and of course did damage to my kids, I didn't need to die because of that. Like, I was an
Right.
imperfect human. And so
Yeah.
whenever I realized that too, like through healing, just like, man, you wanted to die because you weren't perfect. Like, that's so
Right.
sad. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think the more we can extend that kindness and compassion to ourselves, the easier it gets to extend to others. And it just changes the way you interact with everyone, because the work I really focus on is uncovering the subconscious and making it conscious, so that you can see I'm not any different than them and they're not any different than me. Because one of the biggest tenets of trauma is that we will then put ourselves or everyone else on a pedestal, making ourselves either higher or lower with everyone. We can never just
Yeah.
be I am me and they are them. It's always got to be a higher or lower. And so we're either criticizing them because they're lower, or judging them because they're lower, or criticizing them because they're higher and judging them because they're higher. When really, we're all one. We're not any different.
Right.
We look different, we act different, but at our core, our needs are not different. And so I think
Yeah.
that really helped me. There was a really symbiotic relationship in forgiving others and forgiving myself and offering
Mhm.
that kindness, because like, it's okay that we weren't perfect. We
Of
did
course.
some things and we owed some people some apologies. We had to forgive ourselves for that stuff. Like, we weren't
Yes.
we no one was as hurt as the damage we did to ourselves, I guarantee it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And trauma is so important. Melissa, you have a loss,
Mhm.
someone very close to you, and I would like to dive into your personal journey through trauma and loss, and what inspired you to talk about it. Because there's definitely people listening or watching that's been through a loss, losing a mom, a dad, a child, grandparents, and they're probably lost in their ways and don't know how to move forward in life.
Mhm.
Can you please share some your personal journey, please?
Yeah. Well, so I had complex post traumatic stress disorder from a very chaotic, traumatic childhood, where I was in and out of foster care, in kinship foster care. Ended up primarily being raised by my maternal grandmother. Still had a relationship with my parents, but they just knew they were addicts and were incapable of making good choices for themselves or for us, and which greatly contributed to our trauma. Um, and then I lost my dad to a drug overdose when I was 15. And then my mom died when I was 22 with
Right.
complications related to hepatitis C and cirrhosis. And I was pregnant with my first child then. So all of that had not been dealt with. And then I've spent the last couple of years really healing finally from all of that, gaining really good insight, really good tools, and working with others for them to do the same. And then this past December, which was 4 months ago, it was 4 months ago on the 13th. We lost our 18-year-old. He was close to 19, but he was 18 to a synthetic opioid overdose, to this new synthetic drug that's hit the streets and unknowingly, and is 10 times stronger than fentanyl. And
Wow.
it's called cyclorophene, and it's Narcan resistant. So presumably he died immediately. But the reason that I've been so vocal about it is, I want to talk about my grief. I want to live my grief out loud. I was already doing a podcast, or a couple.
Sure.
Um and it really, honestly, because the work I did on myself convinced me of my worth and my value as a human, and that I'm so sure that I don't deserve to live any other type of life than one full of love, joy, abundance, peace. And so, honestly, as hard as losing a child is, I made a decision right then, and I think it was that decision that said, okay, yeah, I'm sure there's parts of this that are going to be really god awful. And there are. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's
Of
easy,
course.
but I think making that decision was kind of like the decision to love myself to begin with. It was one decision and a confirmation of that decision. So it really doubled down for me on my purpose here too. I
Yeah.
I believe that I'm here to I mean, I'm here I believe my personal belief system states that we're all here really to kind of learn how to transmute our childhood experiences and all the programming we receive
Mhm.
and get from that place to love for ourselves
Sure.
and unconditional positive regard. So I think that's the human purpose of being here. But then also we have our little side missions or whatever. And I believe that I'm supposed to share in real time what's happening in my life, because it's the medicine for someone else. And so knowing what I know about grief, I've been through the grief process before. I also lost my maternal grandmother who raised me. So there's been
Sure.
a lot of different types of losses in my life, and we are a very grief phobic society. So using the tools that I had already gained through working on my trauma coming into this
Mhm.
loss, um, I knew that nervous system repair was going to be really important. I knew because we are the ones who found him in our home in his bedroom. That was
Mm.
very traumatic, as you may imagine.
Sure,
So I
sure.
knew we were going to have some real PTSD from that. So I'm constantly looking for the signs of that. The biggest way that it's really rocked me internally is fear around other losses. Like
Sure.
for a little bit, I couldn't be too far away from like the rest of my family without just kind of like what I wouldn't say I'd go into a full blown panic because I have the tools to work through it, but it was difficult. It was really difficult. And then the other part is like real jumpy, like noises kind of make me
Mhm.
jump out of my skin. So I'm watching for the signs of dysregulation, but I'm caring for my nervous system, and I'm making sure I'm eating. I drink water intentionally. I need to move a lot more. I'm not gonna lie about it. There was months where I was sleeping a lot, but without shaming myself. I knew that so much was being repaired inside out when I was sleeping because that was a major trauma. It's literally the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. And God knows I've experienced a lot of things. So I
Yeah.
had to repair, and I didn't shame myself for sleeping. And so, the other part of wanting to share too is when you lose someone that you love this much, especially a child, the pain that can really come from the loss is knowing that other people are going to move on with their lives. Like his friends,
Sure.
eventually, like probably 30 years from now, the amount of times they reference him will be much less than it is now, right? And
Yeah.
so the more I talk about him, the more he lives and the more he gets to help
Mhm.
other people too, because he didn't think this, he just knew he was so smart and it would never be him. Anytime we talked
Sure.
about fentanyl, he was that would never happen to him. So I also have another goal of just letting people know there's this new scary drug on the street and you got to be careful.
Yes. Right. Right. Absolutely. Mister, thank you. Deeply thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm sure my audience appreciates it too. Why do you believe it's so important to talk openly about trauma, shame, and imperfection?
um well, I heard this saying a long time ago, and it said shame dies in safe spaces, and I
Mhm.
recognized this through girlhood. Even like there's stuff that happens to kids, just random stuff, and you feel so embarrassed about it because you don't know that anyone else has experienced it too. And then
Yeah.
as I was an adult, I'd share things with my adult girlfriends and we're like, yeah, that happened to me too. And the relief that you feel. And so when I heard that phrase, I was like, it's so true. And
Yes.
every time I find that one safe person to share something that feels so vulnerable to share and it feels so much better to get it off my chest, it reinforces the notion that like the more we share, the more normalized things become and the less shame we have to feel. And I know for me, hearing that's just shame. Like you're not crazy, you're not broken, you're not anything other than a person who needs to learn how to ignore what their brain is telling them. To learn that
Of course.
everything your brain tells you is quite literally a lie because it only deals in the negative perspective. That's what it has to do to keep you alive. It will feed you catastrophe over and over and over because that's the only thing that's going to keep you from walking out the door, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so the more we can educate ourselves and each other and understand we're just humans. We're not going
Yeah.
to be perfect at any of this, but we
Yeah.
have to find our community and people that we feel comfortable sharing our stuff with because well truly we really weren't meant to do this alone. And so
Right.
finding a way for you to feel safe to share your heart with others is so important and so valuable because that connection that says, I see you, I hear you, I value you. I mean, yeah, we got to learn how to do those things for ourselves too, and first and foremost,
Yes.
but like we need people. And this idea that we don't is one of the things that are really hurting us because I know that's been my real big struggle is identifying that I really craved connection with people, but I've been told my whole life I'm too sensitive. So when this connection isn't feeling deep enough or wide enough, or they're not, seeing me and I'm feeling misunderstood, I'm just shaming myself because I'm too sensitive. Where now is I'm fully okay with going, no, we all need this. And we're just lying to ourselves saying we don't. And so
Yeah.
the more open we can be with ourselves and one another, the less shame has room to work inside of us. And also, the less shame has room to work in others because we're showing people like this is a normal everyday experience. We just don't talk
Sure.
about it enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, when did you first realize trauma was noise you could work with?
Well, honestly, probably not until I started my podcast. Like that book that I
Yeah.
told you about was recommended to me by someone from my podcast. She was one of the early guests
Sure.
and she is a therapist that works with the guy that wrote that book and they practice the finding peace
Hmm.
method. And as I was talking, she like I can do this now, like identify people's shame when they talk, but as I was talking, she could hear my shame. And so she's like, let me
Okay.
offer you this. And we had a couple of interviews together. And then she, encouraged me to buy the book. So I did and went through a little book club series on it. But that's whenever I realized like that's just stuff that's clouding the truth here, like, that's not
Yeah.
real. I mean, of course, my understandings grow and evolve and deepen the longer I do this work on myself because the work doesn't end. I mean, I'm never gonna, like, have a day where I don't use these tools, and I'm not still uncovering subconscious patterns. I wouldn't say
Sure.
I'm still, like, on a healing journey because,
Right.
I think we can really kind of lean into the idea that we need to be fixed, and I'm of the understanding that I don't need to be fixed. There are some things that, obviously I can always work on and I do, but yeah, I think I just had to realize this was just a bunch of programming and we all have it. Like our subconscious starts programming from the second we're born and it takes it in at a much faster rate than our conscious does. And it's all with a negativity bias
Yeah.
from a base of
Yeah.
your ego. So it's going to see everything only from one perspective. And so I think learning that and getting deeper understandings of that over the last couple of years has really helped. But it started really early on. I mean, I had learned some things before that, but truly it was kind of the kickstarter of most of my healing.
Sure. And talking about healing, you have a few workbooks.
Yeah,
I would like to talk a little bit about them. Let's shift this a little bit and let's dive into your workbooks.
man.
So you have one right that
Yeah.
says, what is it? Safe to be seen
Mhm.
and the beauty of imperfection. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
Yes.
so they are workbooks, they're just little like PDF files. They're instant downloads. I just wanted um that was one of the earlier ones. I think I've only made like 5 because I was making
Sure.
them monthly and then Jake died and I just haven't gotten back to it. But um they some of the later ones have like a full 28 to 30-day practice involved where there's shadow work,
Sure.
to uncover your subconscious stuff, like when was the first time I felt that way, why do I feel this, whatever. But Safe to Be Seen really is about, um from my perspective, like I walked around feeling so misunderstood and devalued, and I had to realize that what I was doing was creating scenarios for myself to not be seen. Because do you think that I was actually sharing any of my real self with
Mhm.
most people? No. So I had to like create
Sure.
that safety within, but then also learn how to feel safe whenever I am removing the mask and showing people exactly who I am. So that really helps with visibility wounds. People, a common phrase, this isn't really a phrase I use, but I hear it a lot, is like people who are afraid of being perceived, like they worry about it.
Mm.
Um, so
Yeah,
yeah, it's to deal with like visibility wounds.
absolutely. And where can people find those PDFs?
The easiest way is on probably the easiest is to I have a website, empoweredwithmelisahepner.org, or on Instagram is where I'm the most active, and it's melissa.hepner. And just in my link tree right there, I have a link tree in every single one of my like social media stuff. So that's
Perfect.
probably the easiest ways. And you can get access to all my workbooks or anything there.
Yeah. So you are also a host of a podcast called Emotionally Unavailable.
Hmm.
And congratulations on, I think it was over 300 episodes.
Yeah,
That
thank
is
you.
fascinating. That's fascinating. It took me 3 years, Melissa, to create my podcast, The Influence Exchange, and there was many reasons why it took 3 years. Shame, we spoke about shame.
Hmm.
Judged,
Hmm.
what will people think?
Yes.
And the why. Why are you doing this?
Hmm.
And 3 long years until finally last year, I said, "I'm gonna take that step forward, and I don't care what people think, shame, or being judged."
Yes.
And it's been an amazing, amazing road. And I'm speaking to amazing people like yourself, Melissa, that's sharing a story that's so touching. And I'm a person that I'm learning from yourself. I'm learning
Right.
from you while we have this conversation. So I'm excited that I did create the podcast. And
Yeah.
for someone like you to have over 300 episodes, that is incredible.
Well, thank
So
you.
again, your
About
podcast,
just so you
you're
know,
welcome.
I do 3 episodes a week. So, it didn't take that long to get to 300. I'm celebrating 2
Sure.
years at the end of April. On April 29th, it'll be 2 years. But I was I kind of looked at how I was a consumer of podcast and what hooked me. And for me, it was when I found something I liked and wanted to binge their content,
Sure.
that there was a lot of content to binge. And I loved shows that had a lot of releases. So I committed to 3 a week. It hasn't always been easy, but I've committed to 3 a week and I've always stuck to it. But I, for no other reason, if nothing else came from it, getting to meet people and learn. I mean, my
Yeah.
show has been so transformative for me. Everything
Sure.
I've learned has pretty much come from guests on my show, and I'm so grateful to that. And I also, it's like I love to talk. I love to just yap and connect with other people. And so, that's been really helpful too, where I can have the kind of conversations that I really like and post grief. Like that's been a really good outlet for me because um I don't know, in your personal life, everything's just so kind of like real and raw when you're grieving, and the people are trying so hard to help, nothing helps, and everything just hurts a
Yeah.
little bit. Like sometimes they just
Yeah.
the
Of
well-meaning
course.
stuff that they say, it just hurts, and you're like, but no one on a podcast is gonna do that. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
they just don't
Right.
do that.
Right.
And so like it's been really nice to also my little podcast community that I have formed through making those relationships. But I kind of the evolution of my show really has been getting to the point where I felt safe enough and strong enough to be like, actually, this show's about me. It really is. Like this show really
Right.
is about me learning through the connections that
Yeah.
I'm making. But like
Absolutely.
I wanted to get better whenever I started this show. I wanted to feel better. I was still
Hmm.
deep in a mental health crisis those first few episodes. So like I was coming
Sure.
out of
Sure.
it. I wasn't in the darkest
Mhm.
of the places, but I that was one of the things that I did to help me come out of the darkness was to start the show. And I named it emotionally unavailable because I was very emotionally unavailable. And that was something I had just learned about myself. And so I was like, this is so funny.
Sure.
I think it's hilarious. And so I was like, it's funny, and it's catchy, but also it's so true. And I have gotten to learn in real time through this show. It's so that's been fascinating to like see the development and evolution of myself and the show as it's gone on. But it took me a while to get to where I was brave enough to be like, yeah, no, this is about me. Like I want to
Yeah.
connect with others. I want to learn from them. And
Right.
I hope that the
Yeah.
connection that they hear over, when we're sharing stories helps them as much as it's helping me. But it's about me.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's great. My podcast as well. I overthink. I
Mhm.
overthink too much, and I don't know why. So how can you, that has a great track record, how can you help someone like myself break the cycle of overthinking?
Well, I mean, I can give you like a simple answer, but obviously nothing's that simple. But overthinking happens when we're dysregulated. When our brain wants to
Sure.
feel some sense of control, it caught in like a little thought spiral and
Hmm.
says, "Oh, I can keep you really busy with this so that you don't have to feel." So as long as you
Sure.
understand that any overthinking is related to a feeling that you are trying to avoid, that's your first step. And then whenever I first started having I couldn't even identify that in real time that I was overthinking. I
Okay.
had to teach myself to start checking in with my neck and shoulders and back. And if they were hurting really bad, I knew I was just
Yeah.
overthinking because all my overthinking was fighting with someone in my head at all times. Okay. Like none of it was like, how am I going to solve a problem? I was mad at someone at
Right.
all times because that was one of my archetypes of shame that really took over.
Sure.
Like in that book, he talks about the different archetypes, and the hugest archetype for me was one called the royal, and that is the one who blames everything outside of myself for my behavior because my I
Sure.
cannot handle the fact that I'm behaving that way. And so I'm going to find a reason why it was somebody else's fault at all times. I was constantly fighting with people, and because I would freeze or fawn in public. I was very adverse to conflict. So like I wasn't actually going to say what I thought when you said something to me. So I would
Yeah.
just spend the rest of my life arguing with you about it in my head while I'm showering or brushing my teeth or driving
Sure.
down the road because I didn't like have the nerve to say I don't like that or stand up for myself or whatever when I was face to
Right.
face. So seriously, I was always in my head fighting with someone. And so I trained myself like, okay, Melissa, if you feel that tension, you got to check in. And so that was the first step. And then I realized, oh, I was overthinking. And then I realized how often I was actually overthinking. I'm like, dang, this is really actually
Yeah.
hard. Like I'm always in my head. And so um learning how to identify that you are overthinking is a huge part of it. And so if
Yeah.
you have to set up some system in place where you're checking in with your body or you're making yourself
Yes.
pause to be like, what was I just thinking about? That's a really important piece. But honestly, when we are trying to avoid that feeling, what I started to do was go, okay, I was overthinking. What was the theme of the overthinking? And
Sure.
typically, like I would at first I would have to be like, what wound was that hitting? Like, did I feel rejected? Was I feeling
Right.
abandoned or betrayed? I did recognize after doing the work that I had a huge betrayal wound, and everything betrayed me. Like I was just
Yeah.
walking around like betrayal, 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 betrayal. You betrayed me. You betrayed me. And then I just had to realize like, okay, this is a very open wound and there's a huge
Yeah.
difference between I feel betrayed and you betrayed me. So that was
Mhm.
an area I had to get really honest with people, like where I'm like, I know this doesn't make sense, but I feel really betrayed by that.
Sure.
And so that was a process too, because of course I had to get brave enough to actually say the words out loud.
Right.
But honestly, just understanding that overthinking is just your fear of failure, your fear of being rejected, your fear of being abandoned, your fear of being neglected, of betrayed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And just go, oh, like you felt afraid. I'm recognizing some fear here. Okay, great. What
Exactly.
do you need
Yeah.
to feel better? And give yourself that. I will say, and I have to use this practice all day, every day in my personal life, but like talking to yourself the way that you would have really wanted your mom or dad to talk to you when you were about
Yes.
5 years old every single time, it helps so much.
Yeah.
So you don't have to talk out loud. You just have to like really hold your inner child and your nervous system and just say, oh, you're needing some attention. So if I'm
Sure.
overthinking, I need attention in my heart.
Yes.
It's something inside of me needs love and compassion and nurturing and understanding and reassurance, just saying like,
Mhm.
are you gonna die if this thing goes south? No, you're not. You're
Right.
enough. And so much of
Yeah.
that overthinking really goes back to a lack of trust in ourselves. So that's where it's sometimes easy for us to identify our lack of trust in others, and not always so easy to identify how much we don't trust ourselves. And so just
Sure.
reminding yourself, you can trust yourself. You are enough to withstand anything that comes your way. And that's been a huge one in grief for me, is that
Yeah.
I'm enough and I'm worthy. So holding both of those really helps me to not do all of the sitting in remorse and regret like any parent. It's fair, any parent
Sure.
in my situation that sat around thinking it was their fault, or all the different decisions we could have made as parents that would probably have saved their lives. I see how that happens. I'm not shaming anyone for doing that. But what I know is it's not going to change anything. I don't get
Yeah.
Jake back. No matter how much I beat myself up, no matter how much I wish it was different, I don't get him back. And so
Yeah.
what's the next step? There's a choice there. And my choice was made the day I found him. And that choice was I love myself. And no matter what,
Absolutely.
I deserve a life full of love, joy, peace, and abundance. So that's the
Mm.
series of choices that I have to make every day. So that's why we overthink, is because it gives us that false sense of security when really
Sure.
we just need to realize we feel really insecure. So let's deal with that. Let's feel it. Let's process it. Let's move on. Get out of your head, into your heart. That's what I tell everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you again. I truly, deeply appreciate it. So, Melissa, I will have so many more questions. I would love, but then again, we're going to be here for 3 to 4 hours probably. I like to end my podcast and have one question before we end. I usually ask my guests, what final thoughts or message would you like to share with the world?
um, I would say there is hope for those who are feeling really hopeless, like you've tried everything. Um, I was just talking to a client about this today. Anytime your brain is saying, what's the point? What's the point in trying? What's the point in doing that? What's the point? It always turns out the same. That's just your brain lying to keep you safe. It's going to continue to feed you catastrophe to keep you safe because it doesn't know how else to do that other than
Sure.
to say change is dangerous. And so start there with that understanding. Start to question the things that you think, because everything your brain says to you is a lie. Unless you're trying to use logic to solve a logical problem that requires logic, emotions aren't that. They're not going to use logic to be solved, and they're not to be solved in general. So start questioning. That's interesting that that was my response to that. I wonder why, just get curious. Don't believe and lean into everything your brain is saying to you. Understand that it is going to get better and fairly quickly with just the right information. You just haven't gotten the right information yet. It took me 44 years to get the right information, but once I did,
Sure.
boom. And
Oh,
most of
yeah.
that information has led me to one conclusion, which is I never should have hated myself for making mistakes to begin with. We were
Mm.
designed to be imperfect, and all those things that I deemed as flaws before, I see as my magic now. They make me who I am, and who I am is great at my core. I know what my intentions are. And I'm not always in charge of what my impact is. And so when I
Sure.
make a mistake, I just reflect and I say, how how do I feel after that interaction? Do I want to feel like this? Do I want other people to feel like that? And then I adjust accordingly and I repair and I move on. I don't beat myself up anymore. There is a
Sure.
life on the other side of all of the pain and trauma and shame and just the daily monotony of the human
Yeah.
experience, the societal fear that we can be feeling right now
Absolutely.
with everything that's happening. um,
Absolutely.
Now more than ever, it's really important to learn how to go within. That's actually one of my workbooks, is Surviving the Shit Show. It's about like how to create a good inner world when the outer world is falling apart.
Right.
Because I know that people are afraid. I know there's reason to be afraid, and I do not want to discount any of the bad things that are happening in the world right now. But the world needs people like us more than ever, people willing to share their hearts and their stories and have that compassion for one another. The more compassion that we have, the better this world becomes. And I always tell people, when you change, the world around you changes. When you changed, I bet
Absolutely.
that rippled out to the people in your house. And now the people in your house are going out into the world much happier, healthier people too. And then they're affecting change. That's what we have to do. When the world gets scary, we have to focus on ourselves. We have to learn how to love ourselves unconditionally. And so that's what I would leave you with, is just
Love
to
it.
find the right information, whatever it is, whether it's, finding more podcasts like ours, getting the right book, finding the right therapist or guru or whatever it is that works for you. Do that though. You're worth it. And there is so much love and joy and hope and peace and abundance on the other side of whatever it is you're experiencing right now.
Yes. That was extremely powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Melissa, I appreciate you sharing your story with us today. You are an amazing human being again and extremely inspirational. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the next time we connect.
Yes. Well, you're so welcome. And I thank you for asking me to be on.
Absolutely. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank
Bye bye.
you. Bye.
Before I go, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on YouTube. I truly appreciate you taking the time to be here with me. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other platform, follow the podcast so you don't miss out on the next episode. Because we're going to keep having real honest conversations like this. And remember, your influence grows every time you choose courage over comfort. I'm JV. Stay curious, stay consistent, and keep influencing others. Thank you. Peace out.